Hi, my name is Makenna Ponder. I'm a junior biology major here at Oglethorpe University. And today I'm going to be talking about the efficiency of green roofs in subtropical climates. And I chose this topic today because I've always been really interested in environmentalism in general. And green roofs are just a really cool, sustainable option for climate change. And I just think they're really cool. And I wanted to do some more research into them. So, yeah. So what I'm going to be covering in this presentation is in this slide. I'm going to be talking about the purpose of green roofs and what exactly are green roofs and why we have them. And then I'll be going into the efficiency factors of green roofs, and that will consist of the factors that really go into making a green roof good in a sense, and what it takes to make a green roof as efficient and cost efficient as possible. And then I will be going into this one specific study that was done in Taiwan, and it consists of two different experiments within the paper, and it has to do with the drought tolerance of plants that are used for green roofs in Taiwan and other subtropical climates, and the thermal effectiveness of these plants and their abilities to keep the green roofs as cool as possible. And then I will wrap it all up in the take-home message. So, what exactly is a green roof and what is its purpose? So, these are two pictures of some green roofs, and this first picture is what the most typical example of a green roof is, and that is in an urban setting and typically found in a city. And it is pretty much what it sounds like. It's when there is greenery, shrubbery, plants of any kind on top of a roof for the specific reasons of what a green roof is meant for. And they can also be found on individually owned homes as well, as seen in this picture below, in suburban areas, which they are used for the same purposes as in urban areas, just on a smaller scale. But today we're going to be focusing specifically on urban area green roofs. And the reason why they are mostly found in urban settings is because the urban subclimates within a city tend to have a lot higher temperatures than outside areas or suburban areas outside of the city. And this is for a number of reasons. When you have a higher population in a city, you just have a lot more people living in a condensed area. And this causes people to use more resources and energy at a higher rate, which can create more pollution, more greenhouse gas emissions, and it just ultimately creates higher temperatures in the parameters of the city. And one way to combat that is through green roofs. They are a way to help reduce the use of energy and reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, and just overall create a lot of ways to help combat this higher temperatures that we can see within cities. And this can be done through a few different ways. And the main way that this is done is through building heat control. And the way that this works is the plants on the roof provide shade for the surface area of the roof, and it allows the roof to be at a cooler temperature, which lowers the temperature of the building underneath, and it allows the building to use less air conditioning, which is less energy being produced, less money being needed to use the air conditioning, use the energy, and it's just overall this positive feedback loop of using less money, less energy, and less overall production of new resources to help lower the temperature of the surrounding areas. And the next positive is roof protection. And this is done through the plants on the roof kind of provide a barrier for the roof to help protect it. Um, Roofs obviously have to be replaced every so often from damage and just wear and tear of being an old roof. And the green roofs can help stop the need to replace roofs so often from um, environmental and climate reasons. And so when a roof needs to be replaced less often, it's using less resources, less energy, and again, another way of using less energy to help lower the surrounding temperatures of the city. And so lastly, the last positive of green roofs is rainwater runoff control. And so basically in cities, there is a lot more flooding than there is in suburban areas. And that's for a number of reasons because there's just more streets and less places for the water to go. And so there's a lot more flooding when it rains heavily, specifically in subtropical climates where there's a lot more rain in the wet seasons and there can be even monsoons. And so the way that the roofs protect the city from flooding as much is they kind of trap all of the water. They take in a lot more water and absorb it, and so it allows less flooding and it kind of controls that. And this in turn protects the surrounding bodies of water that are near the areas, the urban areas, because there's less rain runoff and it doesn't allow as much chemical runoff from the harmful chemicals that can be found within the city. And so it just protects a lot of the wildlife and bodies of water that may surround the urban areas. So yeah, there's a lot of positives when it comes to green roofs in mitigating climate control and helping that. So that brings me to what exactly makes a green roof good and what makes it efficient, you know? And so um, there's a few ways that researchers have found that can help make green roofs more accessible and more cost efficient and make them just overall more accessible to more people around the world. And there can be more green roofs, which is great because again, there's so many benefits of it. So it is extremely important to make sure these green roofs are as efficient as possible and cost effective to make sure they're more accessible around the world. And so one of the main reasons is maintenance. Sometimes maintenance on these can be pretty extreme. They have to provide water and soil and all of the things that plants need to grow, and a lot of the structures that they need can be kind of expensive. And so it's important to have plants that can grow on their own and require less maintenance because that's less water being used, less maintenance being required, which is again less money, which can make the green roofs more accessible and more widely available. And so it's really important to make sure that there's just less, the plants that are being used are right for the specific climate in which the building is located. And also the weight of the green roof. Obviously, roofs can't hold too much weight or else the structure of them could be compromised and they could cave in, worst case scenario. So again, water is an extremely important factor in this. Plants need to be able to not be watered as much as possible. They need to be able to survive in the climate in which they are and receive just the water from natural rainwater and the natural climate of the area. So again, it is extremely important to make sure that these green roofs are as efficient and cost effective as possible. So how can we do that? that brings me to the study that was conducted in Taiwan. So Taiwan specifically is a subtropical climate, and it is an island, and so it suffers from the heat island effect, which is why these studies were done in Taiwan, because they do experience higher temperatures than, say, pretty much any other area in the world. They have suffered greatly from climate change, and that's why research has been extremely important for green roofs in Taiwan, which is why these researchers wanted to find out what types of plants would be best for green roofs in Taiwan. And they specifically looked into the morphology and species of these plants. They wanted to see if they would ultimately affect their abilities to have an effective green roof. So that is what they were looking at in this study. And the study was broken up into two different experiments in the same paper. And the first one was drought tolerance. And this experiment specifically dealt with trying to find the best plant species that could sustain its ability to survive in the harsh environment of Taiwan. Taiwan does experience a extreme dry season and then an extreme wet season, which can consist of many monsoons. And so it's really just trying to find the best plants that can survive not only being deprived of water for extreme amounts of time, but also be able to survive with extreme amounts of water more than they are necessarily required to have. So the plants in this experiment definitely got to experience the full range of Taiwan's harsh climate, and to find out the best plants that could survive this harsh climate in these subtropical areas. And then the second experiment in this paper was dealt with the thermal effectiveness of plants. And they wanted to see what type of morphology and or species would best be able to withstand the green roof's effectiveness. And so they wanted to see what plants could best provide the cooling effects for the buildings. They wanted to see if that had any effect on the plant's abilities to cool the building down, which again is kind of the main reason for green roofs, is to cool the building down. That's kind of like the biggest goal of a green roof. And so they wanted to really find out what plants were best suited for that. And so this brings me to the methods for the drought experiment. So as we can see, this is what they use for, this picture right here is kind of an example of what they did in the experiment. They took 31 different common species of plants from 7 different families, and they chose succulents, sedum plants, crucialation acid metabolism plants, which also is abbreviated to CAM plants. And they chose these 3 different types of plants because they knew they are typically found in desert climates and just drier climates overall. So they knew that these would most likely be able to survive with low amounts of water, and they would be able to withstand the harsh climate of Taiwan. And so this study lasted for 7 months, and the first 3 months of the study, they grew under human care, which basically means the researchers were helping the plants grow a steady base to withstand the next 4 months of the study, which was completely on their own in Taiwan's climate without human care. So they watered them and made sure they grew stably for 3 months. And then the last 4 months of the experiment, again, grew completely on their own, experienced the complete dry season and the wet season of Taiwan. They even experienced multiple monsoons. So they definitely got to go through the entire climate of Taiwan and just the extreme differences in terms of water consumption. And what they were measuring here was the length of time in which the plants grew normally. And they described normal growth basically as no dying or wilting appearing on the plant. They were completely fine and growing as they should. And so that's how they measured the plant's growth in this experiment. So that brings me to the results of this experiment. And they broke it down into 5 different categories. They had dead, apical leaves only, obviously wilted, stunted growth, and normal growth. So on the y-axis, we have all 31 species of plants that they used. And then on the x-axis, they have all of the days in which they conducted this experiment, this was just the 4 months that they grew on their own. So they, in this first category, the plants obviously are categorized into dead, which means they only had normal growth for 10 to 20 days. So essentially, they died, but they were completely dead by the end of the experiment. So this category, the plants definitely are not the best option for the green roofs in Taiwan or really any subtropical climate, because they will just die without human care or water in this climate specifically. So not the best option, these few at the top. And then these next 3 categories were not great. They didn't perform too well. Obviously, most of them were pretty dead by the end of the experiment. So not the best option for green roofs either, but again, they grew pretty okay, given they weren't watered or taken care of at all during this time. So then we are brought to the bottom, which is these last 7 species of plants in which they grew for 123 days, which was the majority of the experiment. They had normal growth for almost the entire experiment. So they concluded that these 7 species of plants right here are going to be the best options for green roofs in subtropical climates, because they are able to withstand the extreme differences in the dry climates, the dry season, and the wet season. So yeah, that was what they concluded from the drought experiment. And then we are brought into the thermal experiment. So this is a picture right here of how they set this up. They used a thermal camera to take a picture of the plants throughout the day, and they used 7 different types of species for this to see if species had any correlation to how well they could keep the building surface cool. And they used 2 different temperature methods for this. They used this picture through the thermal camera that took the temperature in Celsius of the surface of the leaves. And they couldn't really conclude anything from just this because it's just the leaf surface. So they took a thermocouple wire underneath the plants to measure the temperature of the building surface, and they were able to conclude data from that, because that is what the plants were keeping cool, not necessarily the surface of the leaves, but the building surface itself. So this brings us to the results of this experiment. And so they broke it down into 3 different graphs, so I will go through all 3 of them individually. And this is the first graph that they produced. with data. And this is a graph of the surface temperature of the leaves versus the time of day. And this is each individual color is an individual species of plant. And again, they use 9. And they weren't really able to conclude anything from this alone because this is just the surface temperature of the leaves. And again, it's really hard to tell just how well the plants are keeping how cool the plants are keeping the surface area of the building based solely off of this. So they weren't really able to conclude any significant data from this. However, they were able to conclude some significant data from this one and the next one. So this is a graph of temperature versus time. These individual lines are different heights of plants. And so this purple line is the average temperature of the roof surface without any plant protection. And then these lines are the surface temperature with the plants. And so this red line is the average temperature of 15 centimeter high plants. And then this green line is the temperature of the 10 centimeter high plants. And then this blue line is 35 centimeter high plants. And obviously this blue line is a lot lower than these other lines. So they were able to conclude that the 35 centimeter high plants did keep the building significantly cooler than the 2 other heights. So they can take this data to that allows them to know that plants that are 35 centimeters or higher are able to keep the building cooler than other heights and they concluded this because most plants that are 35 centimeters or higher have more levels of leaves and are just able to keep the building cooler. So this brings me to the third graph, which is color. They took 2 of the same species of plants, which is the Ipomeo batata, and they took 2 different colors of these, which is the purple leafed and the green leaf batata. And so the red line is the purple leaf batata and the blue line is the green leaf batata. And obviously the blue line is lower than the red line. So they were able to conclude that the green leaf batata kept the building cooler than the purple leaf batata throughout the day compared to each other. And so again, they can use this in the future to say that green leaf plants typically are able to keep the building cooler than purple leaf plants, which is very interesting. So this brings me to the end of my presentation. So what we can conclude from this is that green roofs are ultimately a great way to combat climate change in urban areas through multiple different ways. It's just extremely important for researchers to find the best way to keep these green roofs as efficient and cost-effective as possible to make them more widely available to buildings everywhere in the world to help combat this climate change that urban areas face with higher temperatures. And through this experiment that I covered, they were able to find that green leaf plants of 35 centimeters or higher are best suited for green roofs. And again, this type of research needs to be done more so we can make this green roofs more readily available to the world and help lower the temperatures of cities everywhere, because it's extremely important, and if not, climate change could get way out of hand and it could just create extreme amounts of more problems. So green roofs are definitely a way to help combat that. And these are my references. So thank you. That is all.